I don't have anybody to send out there. Can you ask him to go away? The only thing I can do is give you some advice. Call the sheriff's office tomorrow. The sheriff's office doesn't work up there. I don't have anybody to send.
Okay.
Well, a growing controversy over budgets and public safety after an Oregon woman's call to 911 goes unanswered, basically. It happened in August of last year, but the audio recording only recently surfaced. The woman called for help after her violent ex-boyfriend showed up at her door. She was transferred to the state police because her local sheriff's department isn't staffed full-time and didn't get much help from them either. Listen.
I don't have anybody to send out there.
Okay.
Obviously if he comes inside the residence and assaults you, can you ask him to go away, or do you know if he's intoxicated or anything?
I've already asked him. I've already told him I was calling you. He's broken before, busted down my door, assaulted me. Yeah, so...
Is there any way you can safely leave the residence?
No, I can't, because he's blocking pretty much my only way out.
Well, the only thing I can do is give you some advice and call the sheriff's office tomorrow. Obviously, if he comes in and unfortunately has a weapon or is trying to cause you physical harm, that's a different story. The sheriff's office doesn't work up there. I don't have anybody to send.
Thank you for that. It only got worse from that point. The man did not go away. He broke into her home and he raped her. Joining me now, Sally Cohn, Fox News Channel contributor, and Monica Crowley, who's a radio talk show host, also a Fox contributor. And now we are told that there is a pending civil litigation. They wouldn't give us the details, but that's from the Oregon State Police confirming that there is a pending civil litigation. And the question is, how did this happen?
So this is a unique place in Oregon, we should say, and where this is actually tied not just to local budgets, but to federal budgets. A lot of the policing in this area was paid for by federal money that helped subsidize the area because there's a lot of federal lands there. So part of
their main industry is timber, and we were subsidizing that, but then we took it away.
And there are federal lands that you can't tax because the federal government owns the land, and so they instead subsidize it, and that helped pay for public services. So this is a direct result of some of the cuts that we're seeing at the federal government. It's also a direct reminder of why we need public servants, our military, our police, our firefighters, and that when we talk about abstract numbers of cutting budgets, that those mean people's lives, that people's lives really are at stake. This should not have happened. This is tragic.
As far as cause and effect, I mean, in the law, when you look at it and analyze, you say, is it the cause and fact? Was the taking away of those federal subsidies the cause in fact of this woman's harm? I don't know that we're there yet, but they did have to cut back on their police department. The sheriff laid off 23 deputies and only had 6 left after they took that subsidy away.
The story is so beyond belief. It's such a sad and dangerous state of affairs, but let's put things in perspective. Government at all levels, federal, state, and local, wastes so much money on so much crap. We see all of the waste, fraud, and abuse that goes on. We don't see any budget cutting unless it's a very prominent thing like this. So when they waste so much money and they've got these exorbitant pension costs, thanks to government unions, that money goes to places that perhaps it shouldn't go, and you get cuts that shouldn't happen. So you get the denial of things that government actually should be doing, like police protection. I mean, that is a basic function of government. The fact that they can't even do that is outrageous. It's about prioritizing.
Well, but now some are saying
money coming in.
Some are saying that this is actually about personal responsibility and how you shouldn't be dependent on the government for anything, because you can't depend on the feds to subsidize your town and make sure it stays afloat. That's not really the business of the federal government. And clearly you can't depend on the state troopers to show up when you need them, because instead they might give you the advice of, could you ask your potential rapist to go away? Oh, why didn't I think of that? That's so helpful.
That was insane. Look, they are the state troopers. They're also under-resourced. And look, I'm going to be honest, Monica, I love you, but when that woman was there at that moment, she wasn't on the phone thinking, oh my gosh, all this waste, fraud, and abuse in government. She was thinking, I want government here right now to help me, which is at its best what government does, and
why can't government be there is the question.
Well, when you start,
but let me ask you this, because this sheriff had come out and said, people might want to consider relocating to an area with adequate law enforcement services after he had to cut back. And a similar thing happened in Wisconsin, and there the sheriff came out and said, I want to talk to you about your personal safety. You need to be prepared. You need to take a safety course. I mean, some people are saying this is why this woman needed a gun. She needed some sort of way to protect herself.
Yes, exactly. First of all, when it comes to the role of government, the taxpayers in this town and in the community, they put this to a referendum. Will you go for a tax hike in order to cover these costs and get more police protection in? Those residents said no. They said, we're taxed enough already. Government, you go and prioritize how you're spending money so you can actually do what you're supposed to do as a government. Second thing is, more and more people, because this is such a sad and dangerous state of affairs, more and more people are saying, wait a minute, if I can't rely on the government, then it increases the right and the ability for people to be able to protect themselves. That means fierce protection of the Second Amendment. That means if this woman had a gun, she may have been able.
She could have had. She did not have a gun. She says she didn't have one, but she had the right to a gun. Oregon doesn't have the strictest gun laws in the country.
Right, so
but that's the question, Sally, is whether, and this is in no way to condemn the victim at all. We all know who's responsible for this, which is the perpetrator. But if you live in this town where it's lost all the subsidy, had no industry to support itself, the sheriff is saying, I advise you to go live someplace else. You don't get a way to protect yourself, even though you know you've got this violent ex. I mean, can you really then turn around and sue the police for not being there?
You know, it's a fair question, and look, we should note that she does have a right to have a gun. She could, in Oregon, have a gun. You know, there's also some other factors to put in place here. This ex-boyfriend of hers was obviously strong enough to break down her door and choke her while he assaulted her. The odds that if she had a gun, he would have likely gotten that gun away from her. If we're going to deal in hypotheticals, this could have gotten a lot worse.
Or she could have shot him. Maybe not fatally, but she could have probably fended off this attack.
Monica, when
it's a right to self-defense.
That's right. She has that right. But let me just be clear. Wait, but we also want to deal in facts, not hypotheticals. And we know that for every one woman who defends herself with a gun, 83 are hurt by a gun.
But you got to know, if you're sitting in this woman's position,
come on. Yeah, but the other thing is,
you need something.
I've got
she needed
kids,
something. I got to go.
Kids,
I
got grandparents. They can't defend themselves.
I know, but this is a grown woman who would have, I'm sure, liked to have had some way. Panel, thank you both.
Thank you.